Thanks, Shobha. So yeah, I just want to welcome all of you here today and thank Dr. Swanson for, taking the time to talk to us. So I think to just kick things off, it would be good to just get, a general idea, the short version of your career path and, how you ended up at the University of Michigan and your current roles.
Great. So I grew up in a large family. It was the middle of a pack of 6 kids. We lived in small towns in the Midwest. I was interested in science and I majored in biology. But at the end of my senior year of college, I had to come up with a job. And so I put on my interview suit and I went to any interview that I thought they might be interested in a biology major. And I was sitting in one, and it was for hospital sales reps, basically. And, we're 10 minutes into the interview and I think I'm doing pretty well. I'm, articulate. And the guy stops and says, "Why do you want this job?" And I had no answer for him. But another place that interviewed on campus was Rockefeller University. They were looking for technicians. And I had not stepped foot in a research lab during my biology major in college. And so I got a job there. And after about a year and a half, I was loving the job. But I realized that there were all these conversations that were happening that were beyond my reach because I just didn't have the background. So I thought I would get a master's degree in biology and then come back to that lab and be able to contribute at a higher level. But when I went to the head of the lab and asked if he would write me a letter for my master's degree application, he said no. And he brought me to his office and sat me down, and he was by now the chair of the department. So it was this very fancy office. And he said, "I want you to apply to PhD programs." And I said, "Oh, no, I don't see myself doing that. I'm from the Midwest. I'm going to have a family." And he was not hearing it. He said, "Listen, you don't know how good you are unless you challenge yourself. You have no idea what opportunities or what the landscape will be 5 years, 10 years from now. Like, do not tell me now what you're not going to do. Just get the best training you can at every stage. Keep your eyes open, figure out what you're good at, and then make a decision." So I said, okay. And I applied for PhD programs. And I'm actually embarrassed to tell this story because I was privileged because I was a field hockey player and it was after Title IX had been enforced. I was actually at Yale. So it's not like I was at a backwater school. I should have had some exposure, but I was busy being an athlete, a student, goofing off with my friends, working a campus job. So really it was that mentor's insistence that I think of myself in a way that I didn't. And I started graduate school and I basically never looked back.
So obviously this person was very influential in your life, and it's awesome to hear that, you had a mentor like that. But was there, I guess you said you never looked back, but as you started doing research, did you just finally it clicked you were going to be a PI, or was there ever a moment that you thought about, taking your PhD then and that training and going a different direction other than academics?
Well, I was fairly stubborn. I decided I was going to have a family as I planned. So I actually had 2 children when I was a PhD student. And at the time I was at Harvard Medical School. So it was not the typical decision, but I just said, listen, this is my life and I'm going to lead it this way. And if I can also then continue on this science track, I will. Otherwise, I'll do something else. But I was just fortunate. I got advice along the way. I think I set myself up, was in a good place at a good time in my field. And that's my story and I'm sticking with it.
I like it. So then once, you had created this research lab, I, have read a little bit, looked a little bit into what you do. And it seems like, you have a multitude of roles beyond just being a PI, not that just being a PI is a small task in and of itself. But can you talk a little bit then about what made you want to, continue up the ladder, you might say, and branch off into becoming a leader? And some of your roles include being the president of the American Society for Microbiology at some point. Obviously you're an OGPS now as the director of postdoctoral studies. So what made you want to just continue branching out?
Yeah, I'll answer that by stepping back. I think what really interested me about science from that very first lab that I was in as a technician was I just really felt so excited and privileged to be around so many smart people, people from all over the world, very different backgrounds from my own kind of small town Midwest background. They're really passionate about what they did. And, you know, a fairly wide range of personalities are in labs too. So I just love the environment. And that is what has motivated me. So in my own research lab, I really love interacting with trainees, with students and postdocs, but also by taking on other positions, whether it's just serving on a committee at the university or planning a meeting or working for my society. It means I get to interact with colleagues from other places and build those friendships. And I think that's what has been really so meaningful that I never expected. Kind of the stereotypical view we have of a scientist is they're just completely focused on their data. But as I said, I was really drawn to science because of the people. It's very people intensive. And that has continued to be really rewarding to me. And yeah, why I recommend it to others.
I agree with you completely. I love that aspect of science, is being able to connect with the others and see all the different levels working together. But do you ever, I think especially a lot of times as people, as trainees think about transitioning to being a PI and being more in charge of things, they wonder how you can balance what seems like, at least when you're a trainee, an insurmountable task of just managing your own lab with these other duties. Do you have, are there times that you have to say no? Do you have time management strategies? How do you take on all these roles without just becoming overwhelmed?
Yeah, and again, I'm going to share advice that I got that I still hang on to today. So I remember when I was a junior faculty and I was approached about actually taking on a position with PIBS when I was an assistant professor. And of course I was flattered and excited, but I went to talk to my chair and he listened to my story and he said, that I can see you'd be very good at it, but realize that the perception that others will have, you're at risk of people thinking that as an assistant professor, you're more interested in service and administration than you are in your research program. So at this stage of your career, it's not, I probably would advise you against taking that on, but realize that those opportunities, if they're coming to you now, they'll come to you again, 2 years, 3 years down the road. So I found that very helpful. Several years later, I went to the same chair, and it was right after our department had an external review. So colleagues who I knew from other institutions and I really respected came in, they did a full analysis. And one of the comments they made is that they felt like some of the faculty in the department were perhaps a bit complacent. They were very comfortable, very happy there, and maybe weren't challenging themselves enough. So again, I went to my chair and said, I've got a wonderful lab that I love. Typically I had maybe 4 to 5 people in it, not one of these massive labs with, 12 postdocs or whatever. And I said, am I being complacent? Should I really kick it up a notch? And again, he looked at me and he said, this is my perspective. When each of us are born, we're given a piece of string, and it might be this long, it might be this long, it might be this long. And then the challenge we have is deciding how we want to arrange our piece of string. Do we want to be really have deep expertise in a narrow area, or arrange your string this way, jack of all trades, master of none, or the more interesting, I'm going to do a little more here, a bit more here. He said, all of that is your choice, but realize that piece of string is finite. So if you put more into this, it means less into that and less into that. And that's the advice he gave me. Just think about that. So he didn't tell me like, yes, go out and get another grant. We could really use the money in the department. It was just, empowering me basically to be reflective, decide how I wanted to shape my life and my portfolio. And I have really used that as a guiding principle at each stage of my career.
So then would you say that your priority prioritization of these different components of your career have, shifted from when you were a junior faculty, a new faculty, to what maybe it looks like your responsibilities are now? Do you just prioritize things a little differently?
Absolutely. And I can remember one juncture when I learned that I was tenured. I thought, okay, now people are really going to come knocking on my door and looking for me to up my service. So I did what our traditional first ladies do, and now first gentlemen do when they are elected, move into the White House, is they decide, like, what is the one issue that I really want to push? So with Michelle Obama, it's, let's move. So I thought about it, and what I wanted to commit to is trying to make science a better place for men and women who have children, to make it a more welcoming place, for everyone to thrive. And so whenever I was asked to participate or, take on a particular role, I applied that lens. Like, is this a platform that I could use to advocate for talented trainees and, ease their path? And by doing that, like I said, no, I'm not going to be on the biosafety committee, but yes, I'll be on like the Rackham Executive Board if I have a chance to influence trainee policy, or training programs where we've got more of a chance to kind of shape what that experience is. And to me, that felt like I was more in control, and it would, I could say yes to activities that were more likely to bring me energy and bring me motivation, rather than, suck the life out of me and make me resentful of appointments on my calendar. So that's what I try to do. And I think, the further we each go along in our career, the higher our platform and the more choice we have. But it is our choice. But again, our piece of string is only so long. So you've got to, be disciplined and thoughtful about what you agree to. I also have found it really useful to stick to the rule that you do not have to give anybody an answer right away. You can, give yourself at least 24 hours to consider a position. And during that 24 hours, I often would seek out people who knew more about that particular committee or opportunity than I did, get information from a number of people and reflect on it, and then decide. And in some cases, like when I was an assistant professor and was asked to be, consider a position with PIBS, I was able to say, well, I'm really excited about this. I care deeply about it, but I talked it over with my chair and he advised I not do this now. So I would, he would share the responsibility, but please, keep me in mind in the future, or I look forward in years ahead. So yeah, that's the approach I've taken.
So I like that. I guess your analogy to being like the first ladies or the first gentlemen with picking an initiative. So is your, interest in making, science a better place for, people with families and maybe promoting some work-life balance, also part of what has drawn you to being director of postdoctoral studies? I'm assuming you have a large interest in helping trainees and whatnot.
Yeah, it's a really critical period in our career. And then also I'm aware that there's just a real discrepancy between the amount of services and support we currently provide for our pre-doctoral trainees and our medical student trainees. Whereas the postdocs are more, too often they are kind of in the shadows in terms of what the administration, how engaged the administration is and resources that are dedicated. So I see it as a real opportunity to work with our current postdocs, figure out what they, where their needs are and how we can make training here at Michigan the strongest it can be.
Yeah, maybe you can talk a little bit more about what exactly you do as part of the Director of Postdoctoral Studies. I mean, I am a postdoc, so I'm probably, biased in this interest, but I feel like when I talk to my postdoc colleagues, I feel a lot of us are just very unaware of, you can become very, very focused on just your lab, whereas the grad students have a little bit more of that connection back to outside of lab, just because they are inherently in a program. Yeah. And, you just come as a postdoc and join a specific lab, and you could just stay in that lab and not know of any of the resources at Michigan. So can you talk a bit about some of the stuff maybe you're involved with and what the resources out there are?
Yeah, and I'll again reflect on my own time as a PhD student and as a postdoc. Like by the time I was a postdoc, I had 2 young kids. My husband was a junior faculty member. So, life is really full. So, yeah, when I was in the lab, I was pretty focused on my experiments, and then I was out the door promptly. So it can be challenging because of the stage you're at as a postdoc. Fortunately, we have got a really great team in the Office of Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies. Again, Shoba, Maggie, and Beth, making available a full curriculum for allowing postdocs to explore other career paths that they may not be familiar with, and also to build transferable skills and get the skills they need to go through the job search and job application process. So part of our goal is to be a liaison with the postdoc community through the Postdoc Association. I attend their board meetings and have maintained open communication there so we can understand where their needs are. And then also the other stakeholders that I interact with are the administrators in departments that are responsible for overseeing postdoctoral studies. And here I'm so fortunate to have my professional partner, Beth Bodea, who's also just terrific at maintaining that communication. So it's our job together to make sure that our partners in each of the departments are aware of postdoc policies, such as the minimum salary and time off and the 5-year limit. So those are kind of 2 basic functions that we do. And then we also take on special projects. So right now, one that I'm especially committed to and excited about is we want to provide each department with a faculty postdoc chair, parallel to the grad studies chair, and have that person be responsible for being a liaison and a 2-way communication with our office and their postdoc community, but also setting up a program where each postdoc can meet with a committee, small committee of faculty each year to just review their progress and also their goals. So not to talk about their experiments, but rather their career and professional development plans, and to let them know what resources are out there, perhaps draw from their own network and put them in touch with professionals that could advise them at the next stage. And also to provide a mechanism for each department to take to be more engaged in their overall postdoctoral training efforts, and to understand what are the best practices, which labs are doing a terrific job with their training, and which labs or faculty members maybe have a very different view of what the postdoctoral period should look like, and how can we make sure that all postdocs are getting the best training they can and not being used as workforce, for example. So that's an initiative that we are working on right now.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I know the pharmacology department has started setting up that program, and so I'm excited to see how it pans out. But along those lines then of trying to help people with where they are at their career stage and helping make sure they take the next steps. I think one of the questions that was submitted prior to this was asking, we're in a really unique time right now with the pandemic and everything being virtual, and networking is already kind of a scary word. So do you have suggestions or tips for how you think people can both network and just transition in from the postdoc career, or even just your graduate career into a postdoc or whatever, right into that next career step while we're in the midst of such a challenging time as a nation or as a world?
It's definitely a bizarre time and can be quite lonely and stressful for many people. Fortunately, many units, whether it be a lab or the Office of Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies or your professional society, have had to pivot and offer their programming online. So in some ways that that actually increases flexibility and perhaps makes it easier for people to explore more broadly, because they're not having to get on a plane to go to a particular meeting, or they can listen to seminars, whether they're given at your home department, or perhaps if there's a particular faculty member that you're kind of interested in working with at the next stage of your career. Maybe you can find out when they're giving a seminar somewhere, and you can, log on and join. So I think if you can tolerate more Zoom meetings, there are opportunities, and it is a chance to perhaps take time that we would normally be spending with friends or with commuting back and forth to take that extra time and really invest it in ourselves, and be more deliberate and more proactive about seeking out opportunities, protecting time each week to really position yourself, think about what you want to do next, explore, and have a well-rounded portfolio, so that when the next stage for your career comes, or when things open back up, you'll be in a great position.
So there's a good follow-up question kind of to that in the chat. The question asks for any advice on how to stay productive and even move into an independent researcher role while managing home life with small children, seeing as you've been through that exact process.
Yeah. So I reflect back on that time, and am really grateful that I lived in kind of high density communities where I got to know my neighbors, and they had kids around the same age. So it takes a village. I relied on my village at each stage. So that was really helpful. The other thing that has really helped me is my first boss, Sam Silverstein, so the fellow who pushed me to apply to PhD programs, said, you get more work done in 11 months than you do in 12. And I think that's absolutely true. And I think it's also true, you get more work done in 5 days than you do in 7. So pace yourself. Your kids are only small once. You're going to work for 40 years, 40-year work career. Like, that's plenty of time. So take the time. It's not a race. Just get the best training you can at every stage. And don't put too much pressure on yourself, and get the energy from the kids, and also form a network of friends that are at a similar life stage, and help each other out, and also lower your standards. Figure out what doesn't need to be done well. The house doesn't need to be spotless, and you can get by.
I like that several times in this conversation already, you've called back to, pieces like nuggets of advice that you've gotten throughout your career from prior mentors. So I guess I'm curious to know have you throughout your stage, continued to stay in touch with those mentors? And do you find having, those people that have already been there, done that as really key to helping you succeed?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm fortunate that I was, there's a book called Women in Microbiology that my first PhD student, Brian Hammer, wrote a profile of me. And so I got to put in writing my, that story about Sam Silverstein, and to thank him. And I've also thanked him personally a number of times. But yeah, and again, it's because I personally really just enjoy interacting with people and forming these relationships with friends and colleagues in the field. And that's true of people more senior than I at my level, people more junior. So I'm a big one for seeking advice and getting a range of perspectives, and then thinking it over before I make the next step and decide how I want to arrange my piece of string for the next 3 to 5 years.
I actually think that segues really nice into another question we received. Speaking of, your mentorship, and you clearly enjoy the mentorship aspect of your job, which is excellent as a trainee. I appreciate that. Someone asked, how do you navigate advising a student or a trainee who might be, currently struggling with things in their personal life that will be impacting their training and their work life. And I think sometimes people don't necessarily know where the line is between, how much of an active interest you can have in a given trainee's personal life without overstepping that boundary, but, wanting to be aware of, we have lives outside of the lab.
Yeah, and I mean, the way you phrase the question, you emphasize that it really is the trainee's choice how much they want to share with you. So you have to respect people's privacy, but also it's important to let them know that you care about them as a person. So I would ask, how are things going? You seem a little down. Anything you want to talk about? And then make people aware of the resources that are available, where you can go and talk confidentially with somebody with a lot of experience with personal struggles and strain and support that's available. And just let them know, my door is open. What can I do? And I'll also say that I can remember, this is to add a little humor, I can remember one of my recent PhD students, Zach Abbott, was full of energy. And he was also, besides doing his research, was playing with a club rugby team in Detroit, and also was tried out for and made the Israeli or Jewish team to play in the Maccabee Games, the US team that would play in the Maccabee Games in Israel. So it's what he described it as like the Jewish Olympics. And he was feeling really badly about this because it meant he would be gone for, 3 weeks. And I just looked at him and I said, Zach, I had 2 babies when I was a PhD student. Like, go, have a great time. I know you'll bring home the medal, and it'll be energizing for you. So we have to think not just about how much time we put into our work, how many hours we have, but how much energy we have to put in. And if, taking an evening and spending it with friends, or, playing the piano or something like that clears your head and brings you more energy, you're going to be more effective in the hours that you do spend in the lab. So it's also, as an athlete, it's like interval training. You set aside your workout time, you give it everything you have, but then you've got to build in a rest period, because if you just try to keep, output at a same high level, you're prone to injury and your performance is actually going to decline. And I think the same is true of the intellectual work we do in research. You've got to take breaks and do other things, go for walks outside and clear your head, and then you'll come back and be more effective. So I think this myth that the number of hours you put into work is an indicator of how much you care, or how devoted you are and how successful you will be is a complete myth. And it's one that I find very annoying, because I had it put in my face when I was a young mother in the lab. And I want to be really public advocate for controlling your energy levels, more so than just, the hours.
I think, for me personally, you're a very inspiring example of, someone that can actually promote work-life balance. And it doesn't just have to be, the way to run a lab and have kids is that you just never, ever do anything and you're just overwhelmed.
You work less. That's how you work less, but you work smart. And I think it helped. My summer job was waiting tables. So I was pretty good at like keeping track of what stage different tables were at, and just that kind of being organized, focusing my effort on the most important things, but knowing that my day was limited, and that's how it was.
I feel like one thing trainees sometimes face along those lines is when, their priorities might be, slightly misaligned with what their PI's priorities or their boss's priorities are. And I guess, do you have any advice for kind of navigating when, maybe you're and, you know, in the trainee's mind, it's like, we're doing exactly what you said, like, we're giving it all when we can, but we also need to foster this other thing, and we need to set a side time for like career development. But like, you know, and in the PI's mind, it might be, you're not giving enough to your research project or whatever. So how do you navigate those tricky conversations of misaligned goals?
Well, again, I'm having a flashback to when I was a PhD student and mother of at least one at Harvard. And my advisor brought me into his office and said, you know, Michele, I'm really concerned about your hours. And I looked at him and I said, I think I'm pulling my fair share of the weight around here. And I pointed out, like, I've already co-authored, you know, this many papers, first author this paper, whatever. I said, you know, I'm keeping up. I'm at least keeping up, if not setting a standard. And he said, yes, Michele, but I expect more from you. And I said, I get to make that choice. That is not your decision. It is not my dad's decision. It is not my husband's decision. I get to decide at what level I am going to produce, and what path I'm going to take. So I just wasn't hearing it from him. So I tried to be respectful, but clear. And yeah. It helps to be, amazing. At least in my case, and in that situation, we did have a good relationship. So I wasn't putting myself at risk, really. But yeah, I think to have a really good sense of self and what motivates you and what your values are, and to be true to those, and also ideally find a work environment that is compatible with your own values.
I really appreciate that advice. I think that's amazing.
So I just had a direct message question. I'm glad you brought up Zach Abbott just now, because I know, you know, at least because I've met so many of your former trainees, that you have mentored people who have gone into all sorts of different careers. This question is specifically what advice you might have for people who are thinking about transitioning out of research, but not out of academia. You know, you spend a lot of time being a scientist and training, but how do you support people who want to enter in non-faculty academic careers?
Yeah, so first I would let them know that I think the data, and Maggie, you probably know this better than I think the data are that something like 25% of the Michigan trainees go on and do like the job that their advisor has. The majority thrive in other fields. So number one, I'd say you're in good company. Number two, I'd say this is a wonderful opportunity for you to explore different options. And we're like here at Michigan, there's such a large enterprise that we're part of, where we have the opportunity to have conversations with people who are, let's say, in tech transfer or in the communications office here at Michigan, or people who are managing large program projects, for example, and have conversations with them. You know, tell me what your job is like, informational interviews, essentially. Also, it's important to realize that your advisor, by definition, like knows a lot about being an academic scientist, but not a whole lot about those other things. So you need to be proactive and take advantage of the opportunities that are available. And again, I'll point to our career and professional development team that puts together really wonderful programming to allow our trainees to explore and meet people from different backgrounds. I'd also emphasize that we know from employer studies that we've done through the OGPS team that employers, you know, they're going to be impressed that you know an awful lot about one specific area of research, but they also are looking for people with clear communication skills, ability to work with a team, a track record of leadership, leading a team, and also I think being a good citizen or an advocate also shows that you're not only caring about yourself, but about the larger organization or the larger team. So there are opportunities that you can take while you're a trainee, whether it's getting involved in your departmental committees or like the UMPDA offers great opportunities for our postdocs to get involved in leadership and advocacy positions. And you can try on those other hats and see how much energy they give you, and see if that's where your passions lie. So those are just some of the examples that I would suggest.
I thought it was interesting that when I was looking over the questions that we had received prior to this, it's clear that you just have a vast number of different roles, and so kind of the questions were, you know, on a very wide array of topics, due to your wide, I'd say, expertise in many different areas.
Well, I've also been at it a while, so it's not, I haven't done all those things at once. It's, you know, I think I've been here 25, 26 years. So,
but I do think you provide a unique perspective. And so several people were just curious then, knowing that you have so many different roles and you've done a lot of different things, you know, kind of what are the things that you most enjoy about your job versus what are the things that you maybe find the most challenging, or those things, you know, that you just kind of have to do because you have to do them, but you're not really that interested.
Yeah. What I love most, and this is kind of a high level answer, what I love most and appreciate most about being at the University of Michigan is the opportunities that come up. So every, you know, 3 to 5 years, my portfolio can change really quite a bit. I get opportunities to contribute in many different ways, and to challenge myself, to step into new roles. So for example, when I was a tenured professor, I got to serve on the President's Advisory Commission on Women's Issues that did studies and then wrote advisory pieces to the university president each year. So that was just a really exciting opportunity to see people in different roles on campus and understand that university life really, to make all the wheels turn, requires people with expertise in a really wide area. And so it's exhilarating to think of the many paths that I can take when I'm 20, when I'm 30, when I'm 40, when I'm 50. You know, more opportunities come up, and yeah, it's a real privilege to be able to have that academic freedom. I'm forgetting the other part of your question. I've lost my train of thought now. You wanted me to talk more about
kind of the opposite of that then, you know, are there things,
right.
I'm very happy with what you're doing, but I'm sure there's got to be things that are just challenges. And
I think probably everybody here can relate to this, that it can get really annoying and frustrating when I feel overcommitted, when I know I have too many things to do and not enough time to do them well. So a couple strategies that I use. Number one, my graduate advisor, Fred Winston, taught me as I was moving on to my next stage, you've got to just decide what you're not going to do well. So there are certain things on your list that you want to bring your A game, but there are other things that don't require you to, you know, always do it perfect, your A work, because, you know, we're all here, we're all have achieved at high levels. Not everything requires your best work. So I try to think about what part of the day I can really focus and do my best work, and preserve those blocks of time for, you know, my scholarship, for things that are important to me. And then when I have 45 minutes between, you know, a meeting and a seminar or something, I bundle tasks that I need to do that don't take that much thought, that are a lot of quick, like running through the email and responding and all that. I try to bundle those and get those taken care of at once, and then really protect the time for my deep thinking. So for example, when I have writing to do, I know myself that I can't write if I only have like 40 minutes to write. I need to have a couple hours where I can really get down into that space and be productive. So those are some of the strategies that I use. So yeah, I'm annoyed by when I realize that I've overcommitted and I've got a bunch of meetings and I'm not able to kind of sit and focus on my scholarship. But also I'll go home and instead, because sometimes the thought can creep into your head, oh, I worked all day and I got nothing done. Actually, I contributed to all these different roles, and they count. They're important to the department, to the university. I can give myself credit for those. It might not have been my favorite thing to do, but that is part of my job. And so, yeah, get over it. You did work today. And then, protect more time that, tomorrow or next week to really focus on your scholarship or your pet projects.
I think that is one of those things that's really hard for people to do, but I appreciate that it's probably a skill we should all work on developing.
Not only that, but the other thing great about academia is, yeah, there are times we all feel frustrated because we're overcommitted, but really virtually everything on my to-do list, with the possible exception of teaching, are things that I said yes to. Nobody is telling me I have to do this or have to do that. So if I find myself that I'm getting more and more frustrated or bogged down, then it's my responsibility to pare back my portfolio and so that I can bring more clear thinking and more energy to the things I care most about. It's a real privilege of being in academia and I'll say my department and this university.
I appreciate that. I wanted to circle back too with what you were talking about is the thing you like most is the opportunities that are presented. I would like to, I guess, push you a little further on that question and just ask if you think what the balance is between opportunities that just arise because, you've been here longer, like you said, you've been doing this a while, so you've been able to do a lot of different things versus opportunities that have come about because you've had to really push for them. And I'm particularly interested, in your perspective as a woman and a mother, and you've already mentioned several times in your career where you might have had pushback that people didn't necessarily think you were, working as hard as you should, or people doubted that you could handle whatever because of life. So just, are there things that you really had to push for to get these opportunities, or do you really think it is just the more you're around, the more the opportunities come?
I think it helps to be, to have a clear sense, again, of your values and what you're good at, to have confidence. I think the fact that I played competitive sports from like age 10 through college, I think that helped a lot because I had a goal and I was not going to let people, competitors or whatever, dissuade me from it. I do think that when you are serving on committees and you're interacting with people from other parts of the university, it is an opportunity to learn about what they're doing and let them know what you're interested in. And that can create opportunities in the future, kind of have them be aware that you're available. So I think it's a mix of once you get a reputation for having done certain service or leadership, you do get more opportunities, but also you can put yourself in those positions, I think, by showing interest and contributing productively when you do get an opportunity.
Awesome.
We have another question in the chat. Do you have any advice or experience to share about when you have not felt supported by your boss or manager and how you did advocate for yourself and perhaps sought out other mentors to fill any gaps?
One example was when I started graduate school in New York at Columbia. I was married. And my husband was a postdoc, and then he got a faculty offer at Harvard, and so there was no question that I was going to transfer. So I went to the person whose lab I was in, a yeast geneticist, and I explained the situation, and it was a woman, and she looked at me, and she said, if there was ever a chance that you were going to follow your husband, you should never have applied to graduate school. That was the advice I got for her. Like, you should never have come here. Well, I walked out, and I wasn't going to take that as the last word. So I went and talked to 2 other faculty in the department, people whose classes I'd been in, people whose labs I'd rotated with. And I sat down and described the situation. And you know what? We had really great conversations. And they kind of pulled up their roster and said, oh, you should really go work with this person or go that person. And they encouraged me. And they were excited for me. So yeah, you're going to run into people who have their own interests in mind or different perspectives, but you know, it helps to be a bit stubborn and clear about your goals, and to not rely on one person's advice. Solicit opinions from multiple people. If they're all telling you you made a really stupid choice, then I guess you'd have to take that to heart. But yeah.
I think it's, you know, very obvious that, you know, I can appreciate that you clearly have a good sense of self-worth, and, you know, you're willing to fight for, you know, your needs and your wishes and your desires. And it seems like that's been the case for, you know, most of your career. And it's not something that, you mentioned the competitive sports, so maybe part of it was just starting with that. You've always been able to fight for yourself.
Also, I grew up in the middle of a pack of 6 kids.
Okay. that too. I was going to say though, so knowing that, yes, this seems to be something you've always been fairly good at, which is awesome. But is there anything you would, you know, if you could go back and tell your younger self a piece of advice now that you've been through it, is there something you wish you could tell yourself when you were navigating that process when you were younger?
I think it's easy for us at each stage to think like, oh, this is a make or break. If I don't do something, you know, accomplish X right now, that's it. And it's just not true. I mean, we have got, as I said, like 4 decades of work. And I think if you talk to any senior person, you'll find that they didn't necessarily go straight from A to B to C, but you know, every 3 to 5 years, your portfolio can change. And so I would just have confidence that as long as you're getting good training and adding to your skill set and learning more about yourself and what energizes you and where you want, you know, what you're good at, then you can continue to put together a portfolio, weave a quilt, or, you know, build a quilt that you'll feel good about. And actually, speaking of feeling good about, can I just add personally, those 2 kids that I had when I was a PhD student are now thriving as really wonderful young adults with partners and homes of their own, fabulous careers. I'm super proud of them. So I didn't screw them up by having them when I was a poor, busy graduate student.
That's good to know. I guess kind of as we're nearing the end of our time, then looking forward to the future. You know, we've talked about where you came from and how you got where you are and what you do now, but you know, we all still have goals. So what are your goals now for the future, and what are you looking most excited about being able to develop in the future?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Maybe you all can help me think through this. Solicit opinions. So I was able to be successful as an academic scientist because we did some really the trainees, the PhD students and postdocs in the lab did some really beautiful mechanistic studies to understand how Legionella, a bacterial pathogen that lives in water, grows in amoeba or macrophages, but after the Flint water crisis, when there were outbreaks of Legionnaire's disease for 2 years in that city, I was recruited to work with a team to try to understand whether the messed up water chemistry in Flint was a factor in the spikes of Legionnaire's disease, a waterborne disease. So I worked with people that were water engineers, epidemiologists, physicians, statisticians, and we, I think collectively, this interdisciplinary team put out a really important study that showed, in fact, it was the inability of the city to deliver safe water across the city that contributed to the Legionnaire's disease, and in particular, the heavy metals that corroded, the lead that got into the water from because they didn't add anti-corrosive, also bound up the chlorine that is added to keep the bacterial numbers down. So that's what put the people at risk. So that, that work was done under the bright lights. It's now tied up in the courts. And it really was the first opportunity I could take kind of my expertise in this fascinating little bacterium, but apply it to an important public health issue. And so and then also in parallel, my work in the leadership of ASM has given me opportunities and skills. And I also, I do a podcast this week in microbiology where we try to get science out to the general public, our stakeholders. So I am want to make the most of this stage of my career where I can take advantage of the platforms that I have to give back more to more public outreach, public policy, rather than perhaps identify another gene or another mechanism or signal transduction pathway. So those are the things that I'm thinking about now. And frankly, the postdoc office is a great opportunity to do that. I think we're in a position to really set a new standard for postdoctoral training and set up policies that would be a model across the country. So that's something that is energizing for me.
Awesome. That's
yeah,
good to hear.
But I'm not sure.
You've made it this way, and even you don't always have the clear direction to the future.
Right. But I'm asking advice. I'm talking to people and getting it.
Always good to reach out to others, it sounds like, has been a key to your success.
Right.
I don't know if there are any more questions from any of the trainees in the chat, or if not, I'll just wrap up and thank you so much for having this chat with me today. It's been really interesting to learn about your career, and I'm going to keep the string analogy. I think that's actually a really way to describe that, and I really like
that,
it.
And that you get more work done in 11 months than you do in 12.
I like that. Do you have any parting advice for the trainees? Anything you didn't get out that you wanted to get out today?
Yeah, I think that the stereotype that an excellent scientist is just really fixated on their experimental model and their data, that's really not accurate. It is such a people intensive business that, and as all work is, it really, you benefit so much from interacting with other people, communicating, working in teams, building friendships that can buffer, the difficult periods, but also we can help each other along the way. So I think I've underestimated what a huge contribution just my friendships and relationships that I built since I was a graduate student how much they've propelled me at different stages of my career. And then of course, I want to do the same for others. So yeah, we're all in this together. And for me, it's what makes the work really energizing and satisfying.
I think that's a lovely note to end on, unless anyone else has any last pressing questions.
Thank you very much, Tracy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle and Stacy.
Yes, thank you both. And for those of you, before you take off, I put a link in the chat for our feedback survey. It only takes about a minute and it's anonymous. It helps us guide the future programming that we as a CPD team offer. So thank you again for coming. Thank you so much, Michelle and Tracy, for sharing your expertise and experiences.
Yep. And you all know how to find me. M Swanson at umich.edu. Happy to chat anytime.